The Imitation Nation podcast covers all things counterfeit, hosted by Shabir and Bersafdar of the Partnership for Safe Medicines and Sven Bergman of Venture Global. All statements are their own and not the opinions of their employers. Happy Thursday, Sven.
Happy Thursday, Shabir, or as Stacy would call it, Happy Friday Eve.
I'll tell you that we had to retake this intro because I actually thought it was Wednesday. That's how crazy my week has been.
It's pretty busy. I'm with you.
Well, we have a new FDA commissioner.
He was confirmed, yes. Let's see how it goes.
I'm excited for one of my favorite agencies in the government. And I guess it reveals that I'm a weird pro-institutionalist kind of person, that I have a favorite agency. But the FDA is my favorite agency.
I might be vacillating between HSI and FDA, but it's...
Every time HSI catches a counterfeiter, I get excited, and I cheat on the FDA by liking HSI also.
Yeah, and a quick plug here with law enforcement being so close to them, I'm about to embark on my police unity tour ride again in May, where I ride from New York to DC together with 2,000 other police officers in fundraising for fallen police officers. And so I am, starting to train for that. So I'm actually on a team with some HSI folks, and I'm quite excited. And for folks that listen to this, on my LinkedIn, there's a fundraising page if you want to contribute.
Oh, we're going to put that fundraising page in the show notes.
Oh, very nice.
So I want to talk for our first story about a very unusual occurrence, which is a counterfeit medicine found in a bricks and mortar pharmacy. And it's not a coincidence that in both cases, when we found counterfeit medicine in a bricks and mortar pharmacy in the last 12 months, it's both times been a fake Ozempic. I'm on record saying that there has been an enormous amount of crime in around the GLP-1 space. There's been obviously lookalike counterfeits like we're going to talk about. There have been illegally compounded or research grade products sold. There's been problems with actual legally compounded products. And the patient safety risk of the GLP-1 supply chain, when you leave it any way, the legitimate supply chain has proved to be just a problem. And this is an example of that, where I got word from the good people in the world of the Board of Pharmacy that the Arkansas Board of Pharmacy had held an emergency license suspension for a distributor who sold a lookalike counterfeit of Ozempic into a pharmacy into Arkansas. And the vendor themselves had a license, but only to distribute medical gas, not prescription medicines. And the Board of Pharmacy had been in an ongoing debate with them about it and had subpoenas outstanding with this distributor, which they had not answered to date, which was a point of soreness for the Board of Pharmacy General Counsel. And they shipped a product which was definitely not an Ozempic pen, but was labeled and looked like an Ozempic pen in an Ozempic box to a pharmacy in Arkansas. A patient cited the problem after being dispensed it, said, the dial-a-click on the pen was not dialing to the right dose. It was not in the right increments that the patient could use it. And so the patient knew something was wrong. And the pharmacist, of course, did not open up everything and look at it before sending it, because you don't do that. It's in a sealed box, right? Yeah. And patient brought it back. The vendor sent a second one as a replacement for the first one, and they called the Board of Pharmacy inspector. And this is where, everybody makes mistakes, but this is what I say to my teenagers. It's how you handle the mistake that I judge you on. Pharmacy immediately made the patient whole with product from a prime distributor that is not in question. Patient was happy. The pharmacist quarantined the suspect product, as you were supposed to do by law, but also because pharmacists are careful, the most careful people in the supply chain, and proceeded to call the Board of Pharmacy, who came over, and this is why I'm telling the story. They used a new app from the National Association of Boards of Pharmacy called Pulse. They scanned that product, and it instantly came back as fake.
Oh, boy. Wow. Ultimately, the system worked as it was designed to work. I'm glad that the patient realized it before he administered it. Well, they have probably heavy tested the counterfeit yet, right? What's in it? They don't know what it actually was, right? So they don't know. It's just
I circulated pictures of it amongst pharmacists whose best guess is that it was a Victoza pen, which would be, I think, liraglutide. So you wouldn't have you don't want to be taking a drug that you don't know what it is. Like, that's obviously unsafe, but it's not like it was filled with insulin, for example.
Right. Well, that it's kind of, when you start over, like, not surprisingly, it was Ozempic. It's, as we discussed many times, crime follows the money. It just does. And, the massive demand for these amazing drugs that are right now out there have sparked a variety of unsavory behavior. Counterfeit, as you pointed out, some dangerous compounding by folks that shouldn't be compounding, like not your good compounding pharmacies, but, nail salons or beauty spas or whatever, who are offering these injections. And so I'm very, very glad that the track and trace system of the DSSCA was working. And that app is really cool. Is that available for pharmacists? Is that for just the FDA, or like, is that something that will be broader available? Like, that's awesome.
So it'll be available to members of a supply chain who are also people who are allowed to handle the Drug Supply Chain Security Act data, like the serial numbers, and are allowed to run product verifications. You and I, at not licensed members of the supply chain, can't randomly ask Gilead, is this bottle of medicine that you made really the right thing? Can you check the numbers? I mean, I probably could, because I know the brand protection people from Gilead, but you're supposed to be a member of the licensed supply chain to be able to use this app, and they're rolling it out to regulators now. And having it in the hands of the Arkansas Board of Pharmacy is great, but it will be rolled out to pharmacists later this year.
Yeah, and I think the only thing from that, to when we prepping for the show, and I kind of ask, hey, how did that happen? And to your point, a pharmacist was, using a new supplier, and you can share why he was sharing a new supplier. But I think, as a general lookout for anybody, as you bring new suppliers on, and this is across industries, be very, very careful with, know your supplier and make real background checks on who they are and what they are, and check their licenses. And because there, unfortunately, are so many unscrupulous actors out there, that's how they get you.
I'll say this is something I teach pharmacists in my continuing education course about the Drug Supply Chain Security Act. But if you have a reason to suspect medication may not be real, you are obligated to quarantine it and verify it. Right now, you should be doing that anyway. But later this year, I think my evidence will move to, at the point at which you're taking on a new supplier, you should probably be verifying their product for the first couple orders. The fact that they're new is the suspicion criteria that you should be applying to quarantine. And with access to this app, you'll be able to do it nearly instantly. I can imagine, because I am a sneaky kind of guy, ways to construct fake product that would maybe sneak by this, but this is going to take out a lot of fakes around the world that get made all the time in a way that is going to be great for patient safety.
For me, that's a win. That this was.
It's a win for that patient. It's a win for all of us who take medicine. Tell me what you found this week in the news.
Oh boy. So, well, we stumbled upon something I didn't know existed. So we got some news releases from CBP that they had seized large batches of counterfeit U.S. Postal Forever stamps, rolls. And first, when I kind of looked at them, like, maybe it's a fluke or somebody, but then those are large. And I made some phone calls around. The two that we got news releases on, they're not the only ones. There right now is a real flare-up of this counterfeit postal stamps. So somebody in China figured out that counterfeiting stamps can be a very profitable business, because you're basically replicating a sticker. And so they seized 360,000 Forever stamps, which, the retail value of those things is over $250,000. And they seized them in Birmingham, Alabama, and Chicago. And so my first reason was why I started to phone call around. Chicago is a mail port, and it made sense why it came in there. And Birmingham is not. And so with Birmingham, the way it appeared is that either it came in by express consignment, so it was shipped in by a private shipping company, not the U.S. Postal Service, or that it was part of a controlled delivery where they're actually trying to work up the supply chain. So it's one of those two reasons. But the amazing thing is these stamps, when you look at the seizure pictures, they look very similar to what I'm holding in my hand here, which is the real ones. And the crazy thing is how cheap they were. They were selling them for $24.99 for a roll. And when you and I were preparing for the show, we Googled like cheap US forever stamps. And to our great surprise, we found out that they were not only coming up as the top searches in Google, but that they were coming up as the sponsored searchers in Google. Meaning the good people at Google decided to take ad money from the company selling these stamps. And for me, this was certainly shocking that Google does that. So if anybody from Google listens, might be something you might want to review of where the ad money is coming from. But yeah, these stamps are currently being wildly sold. And if anybody wants to or thinks about buying fake stamps, Shabir and I looked up the penalties. The penalties are massive. It's basically faking currency. And you're looking at decades in jail, including years in jail if you use counterfeit stamps. So, and according to the folks I talked to throughout the week, there are security features in here, which can be detected by the machinery it runs through at USPS. So they have a way to screen them out in the supply chain or as they distribute the mail. And it was shocking how large that seizure was.
When you found the stamps that were worth like 25 cents per stamp, I thought to myself, okay, maybe the people selling them are people who bought them back when they were worth 25 cents. And now they're selling them now. And that's how they can be so cheap, even though it makes no sense why you would buy and sell stamps for the same price, just to make some extra dollar on shipping. You would charge current price for them, and your profit comes from the fact that you were smart enough to sock them away when they were cheaper. No, there's no time at which a forever stamp ever cost 25 cents. They debuted at 41 cents back in 2007. They've never been worth 25 cents. And it doesn't make any sense that there is a volume discount for buying stamps. You buy 100, it's 100 times the face value of the stamp. I'm so surprised that this is happening because, as you know, Google paid a $500 million fine a number of years ago for assisting illegal online pharmacies with their AdWords. And I'm sure that some of these vendors have had a little bit of help from the AdWords support team who are now paying Google for pay-per-click ads to sell their counterfeit stamps. I don't understand why they're not going to get in trouble for this as well.
Well, we'll see where that goes. When I Googled it, I Googled US forever stamps cheap. And then not only did the sponsored search, and not just one, there was like 2 or 3 companies that had sponsored, or 2 or 3 websites that had sponsored searches for their incredibly cheap 20-cent stamps come up. But Google also gave me several suggestible hints of what other people also searched for, which was US stamps wholesale, US stamps clearance sale, and US stamps discount. So it gives you other search word suggestions. So to your point, yes, this is not necessarily by accident. So as I mentioned, I made a couple of phone calls around. Since CBP has taken out a variety of large-scale seizures, the U.S. Postal Inspector Service is looking at it. And I know if you said that the U.S. Postal Service Inspector Service is one of the most ferocious inspection agencies, and they are. And I also made sure that I made my contacts aware of that. Hey, when you Google this, there is sponsored searches. And while I was on the phone with them, they Googled it and they was like, isn't that interesting? So it would be lovely if it could start to have counterfeit sponsored searches.
Historically, I'm pretty straight arrow of a human being. I don't dabble in crime. I actually would make a lot more money with what I know about counterfeit medicines if I decided to go bad, but that's just not how I'm wired. But I've always been told my whole life when I was like, wow, wouldn't that be an amazingly profitable industry? Everyone always said, whatever you do, don't do it through the mail. Because if you postal inspectors decide that they're going to prosecute you, you are done for.
Agree. Oh, no, absolutely. And, think about it. I remember when I was campaigning for various candidates during election seasons, they're always like, don't touch the mailbox. Never put it in the mailbox. It's like immediate felony. And I was like, okay, fine, I won't. They're like, hang the door up. Don't touch the mailbox. I'm like, all right. Anyways, before we move on, for me, it's just one thing. And we come back to this theme every single show now. Dear online firms, dear Google, dear platforms, dear all of you, please care. Please care. If there's a counterfeiter that wants to advertise on your service, say no. Like there have to be policies in place for this. It is that this continuously come up, that a counterfeit company that clearly sells a product that cannot be legit gets multiple sponsor spots on Google. Something is broken there, and it's got to get fixed. And I think that part of the industry, as far as search engines and marketplaces, are just either willfully blind or purposefully not following it. And it's an issue that has to get fixed, and it comes up every single show we have. So we will have to do a deep dive into 231 time. I'm just telling you.
Well, I think I'm going to go buy some of these stamps, and then we'll find out. I'll try and get someone I trust to validate that they are counterfeit, because I don't know any of the security features, and I'm not sure they're public. I'm not going to mail them.
But why don't you talk about the other story you found? I think you found something out there.
So in January, the Department of Transportation, the U.S. Department of Transportation, issued an alert about a massive growth in counterfeit car parts. And I actually know this from having met some of the folks that work in the coalition around car part safety. And the alert was specific about the risk of fake airbags. And that actually terrifies me, right? Because you don't test your airbags. Like, your airbags sit around silently. You don't even know they're there until they need to go off. And then there's no like do-over for that. It's sort of like getting a fake cancer medication. You don't sit around wondering if it's real and trying it out and testing it. Like, you basically get cancer, you go into the infusion center, and you don't even think about the possibility of what happens if it's not real, because there's, the do-over, you might be dead for the do-over. So I thought that the fake airbag element was really disturbing, because they had said that they found 490 that they intercepted entering the country in 2024, which is a 10 times growth of what they'd found in 2023. And maybe it's because they're looking harder. I don't know. But Homeland Security Investigations is cited in the alert as having 40 open investigations into fake auto parts, not all of which are airbags. And I was really, really disturbed by this. I mean, I'm lucky enough and privileged enough to mostly take my car to the dealer for its regular maintenance. I have had some repairs done by a local shop that I trust, but I don't know how counterfeit savvy that person at that local shop is. And if I ever need to replace airbags on a car, I'm definitely taking it to the dealer, which is the advice in this alert.
Yes. I've worked in the space. I worked for branded car manufacturers. Counterfeit car parts has been a massive issue for years. To your point, they're very hard to make safe. Like, you can't really put a seal on them. The distribution network is completely open, means it gets sold by somebody across multiple layers of distribution and can be bought by anybody that repairs cars, right? So you can buy them online everywhere. So it's not a closed distribution network at all. What was interesting when we kind of looked at this explosion of airbags, pun intended, was that this most likely was actually caused by the recall of all of the airbags about 2 years ago. Remember, Takata had a massive recall of like 1 million some plus airbags. I remember because one of my cars had a recalled airbag, and I drove with a non-repaired, non-recalled airbag for a year and a half because they didn't have enough airbags, knowing that if I would, as you call it, test my airbag, I would have shrapnel in my face. And yeah, there were other folks that are like, oh, you can buy them somewhere else. No, don't. And so we waited for the actual car manufacturer to have the part available again. But that's probably what these criminals are capitalizing on, is that there's still a shortage of all of these to be replaced Takata airbags that still folks waiting on these replacements for.
I don't have the incident documented, but I have been told by the people that work in this space that there is already one active investigation around a counterfeit airbags deployment causing the death of an individual in the U.S. right now. And that means that there's probably a lot of cars running around with counterfeit airbags.
Yeah. So if you are out there and you have a airbag that still is under recall and your dealer cannot find the part, do not go outside the distribution chain. Do not go to the guy in the at the street corner of like, no, I can find an airbag. Don't. Wait for your manufacturer to really find them and make sure that they're properly inspected by them. So Yeah, or go to the dealer after it's installed and make sure, like, is this a legitimate airbag that was installed?
I've actually handled some of the fake airbags at trade shows where where we've been doing briefings on anti-counterfeiting efforts, and so I would not be able to tell. So if you are buying a used car and the car has had, according to the NTSB and the transportation department say that you should always get an independent history of the car to see if it's been in an accident, if it's not a new car. And if it has been in an accident, almost certainly get it inspected at a dealer who can, and specifically ask them to check the airbag to see if it's been replaced with a fake airbag. Because you don't want to find out that you made a lemon purchase when you're in after you're in an accident and the airbag doesn't deploy.
That's too late to do due diligence on. By the way, speaking of due diligence, to loop back from last week's show, remember when I told you about the Indiana University fake apparel I bought?
Yes.
So for you, I wore it today. Well, two things. The sweater is breathtakingly comfortable. But my favorite thing is, so I put it on, I tell my wife the story, and she goes, I didn't even notice it. She's like, the logo, which is IU, it's a pretty centered logo. It's not centered. It's off by like an inch to the left. So it's not even centered. But the sweater is very, very comfortable. So I wear it in shame, but it's very comfortable.
Well, I'm just glad that you don't need that pullover hoodie, that fake pullover hoodie to cure your cancer, and that the only consequence is a fashion mistake.
Either that, or I might develop a terrible rash or somewhere. But I'll keep you posted. But yes, I agree. Terrific news that the DSCA is working, and that was a good win for the week. Thank you for the update.
All right, so for next week, I'm going to go buy some stamps, some too cheap to be true forever stamps off of some Google ads, and let's see if we can find someone to verify them.
Hold them side by side and see. I looked at the real stamps. I didn't see anything that said security feature to me. I was assured they have them. So yeah, let's maybe see if we can find somebody.
Yeah, I have good stamps that I bought from my local post office because I actually like that office quite a bit, and I buy my stamps there to keep them in business. I want to make sure that someone thinks that lots of people use that post office, which they do. And so I will hold them side by side with the ones I know came from an authorized source that are definitely not counterfeit, and we'll take a look at them.
I like it.
All right, we will see you later. The Imitation Nation podcast is a production of Cause Stories and is the sole owner of this production. Podcast production by Shabir Imber-Safdar. Podcast management by Sarah Imber-Safdar. Theme music written by Jonathan Boyle.